All right, so 900,000 MikroTik routers vulnerable to total takeover. Man, okay, who was it? What were those other routers? Oh man, it was like Black Hat, Asia, router. Wait, no, Pwn to own. Pwn to own Asia routers. Look, yeah, it started like I've had it since I was really young, and then it just kind of got bigger. So like I like to use it as a joke. I'm like, well, you see, it gets bigger over time. I'm gonna be a hacker. 1 year later, yeah, it grows. Every time I need to fix somebody else's code, it grows. So yeah, Netgear RAX30 routers, and there were some like what were those, like AX12 router vulnerability? Was that it? Oh, router. Yep, this was it. So like lots of router vulnerabilities year over year, really reliably. Asus, Netgear, and MikroTik. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. What's up, November? How you doing, man?
Patch now, up to 900k MikroTik routers vulnerable to total takeover. Researchers have delivered working exploits for routers, which when combined with default admin passwords can be a recipe for cyber disaster. Up to 900,00 MikroTik routers, a popular target for threat actors including nation-state groups, may be open to attack via a privilege escalation vulnerability in the router's operating system.
Let's give you guys an idea of what we've already covered today. You can check Twitter, but we covered AMD ZenBleed, we covered fraud GPT, malicious GPT models being used for phishing. There's Worm GPT, which we covered last week. And then we did a follow-up on the Norway government hack from the Avanti 0 Day. That was an API authentication bypass. And we covered Apple 0 Days, a rollout for Apple 0 Days. There was a state management flaw in the kernel that allowed people to actually manipulate kernel state. And that was used in connection with Operation Triangulation, which is a large mobile espionage campaign that's been going on since 2019. We also covered a new malware that's targeting macOS cryptocurrency users by creating lures using fake blockchain games and getting people to install malware and then provide their admin password. Then it steals stored credentials using PyCryptDome to decrypt the Apple keyring. So that's what we've covered today. So far. We got a lot more.
Up to 900,00 MikroTik routers.
Nation states, privilege escalation, vulnerability. Okay, let's keep going.
The vulnerability, CVE 2023-30788, gives attackers a way to take complete control of affected MIPS processor-based MikroTik devices and pivot into an organization's network, according to researchers from VulnCheck, which just published several new exploits for the flaw. Attackers can also use it to enable man-in-the-middle attacks on network traffic flowing through the router, they warned. Versions of MikroTik routers stable before 6.49.7 and long-term through 6.48.6 are vulnerable to the issue.
Guys, please follow Rox. If anyone just came in, please follow Rox. He just rated in.
The worst-case scenario is that an attacker can install and execute arbitrary tools on the underlying Linux operating system, says Jacob Baines, lead researcher at VulnCheck. Remote and authenticated attackers can use the vulnerability to get a root shell on the router by escalating admin-level privileges to that of a super administrator. MikroTik has released a fix for impacted routers versions, and admins should apply it quickly. The stakes are high. MikroTik claims numerous well-known organizations as its customers, including NASA, Abe, Ericsson, Saab, Siemens, and Sprint.
Yes, we always see Siemens and Schneider Electric always end up getting popped. They're very high-profile targets. Ericsson and who? Nokia are like competing to build out the US's 5G infrastructure and win contracts. Sprint, who the fuck even thinks about Sprint anymore? But Siemens and Schneider Electric are always getting popped. High-profile targets, high-value targets. Lots of IoT, industrial control system stuff. Like, we always cover industrial control system security because it is a huge issue in this country. Rip and replace is not happening fast enough. Their hardware crypto modules on a lot of the edge devices that they provide to their clients. And those hardware, obviously, due to their nature, hardware crypto modules can't easily be updated. So they say rip and replace, bring back in the consultants, let's do it all again.
Several ISPs use its routers as well. A Shodan search showed that as of July 18th, there were between 500,000 and 900,000 MikroTik routers that are vulnerable to CVE 2023-30799 via their web or Winbox interfaces. MikroTik devices have been targeted by advanced attackers for quite some time because they provide powerful access to protected networks, Baines says. Groups such as TrickBit, VPNFILTER, and the Slingshot Advanced Persistent Threat Group have all been known to target the device. In 2022,
ICSOT, the field where hackers can kill, literally results in deaths, which is why I tell you guys this shit's important, right? So we don't shy away from talking about politics because unfortunately technology and politics are interconnected, probably a lot more than most people realize. I've worked for companies that gather your facial recognition data and store it in secure enclaves. They are fighting off Russians all day long, all day long. The people who create the technology that, controls your livelihood, right? Controls the livelihood of the people we care about, the people in hospitals, the people, in the field. Those people are political too. They have political aspirations. They make political decisions, right? They make decisions based off of their economic and political principles, the amount of risk that we're willing to accept in certain environments, right? And you're not a part of that conversation in most cases. I kind of have been in some cases, right? But I've worked for social media companies, multinational media companies, U.S. companies that work with the government. I'm not a Fed. But I have had to pass an FBI background check in order to work at a specific company that was working adjacent to federal agencies. So what are we doing after this? What are we doing after news? So basically, they're political people. Sometimes we talk about politics here. Politics and technology are interlinked much more than most people would like to admit or realize. What are we going to do after this? We're going to do interview prep, bike stream, or gaming plus YouTube. And when we watch YouTube, we watch food videos, we watch politics videos, we watch news videos, and we talk about those things. We talk about the haps in the world. So go ahead, cast your vote. Most democratic stream on Twitch, baby, let's fucking get it.
Groups such as TrickBit, VPNFILTER, and the Slingshot Advanced Persistent Threat Group have all been known to target the device. In 2022, Microsoft warned of TrickBit actors using MikroTik routers as proxy servers for its Command and Control (C2) servers. In addition, the Vault 7 WikiLeaks data dump of classified CIA documents contained an exploit for MikroTik routers. This is really smart.
This is really smart. Think about it. So if you get into the router, right, and then you compromise the boxes downstream, right? You compromise the boxes, the containers, right, the servers, the client devices downstream, and then use the MikroTik router as a proxy, right? As most of you already know, but we have people who come from all sections of Twitch, people who come from the gaming section of Twitch, people who come from the politics section of Twitch, and then there are a lot of you who come from the tech and security section of Twitch. So Raiders, sometimes I explain things at a very fundamental level. Feel free to add on. Don't do the well, actually, but feel free to add on and go further in depth, because some people here, like November and Saint, are technologically inclined. So, I love it when you guys add valuable insight. But nobody likes the, well, actually, motherfucker, right? So don't do that. But basically, guys, when we're talking about using a proxy, right, you can imagine that there are three computers, yours, mine, and your mama's, all right? And then we got the router right here, right? And then we have the adversary over here. All you bring to the conversation is bussy. That's right, Nabil got that fire bussy. So there's the attacker, right? There's the attacker-controlled proxy, which is a MikroTik router, and then there's me, your mama, and you, right? On our computers, hanging out, la-da-da-da-da. Not a care in the world, right? No idea that we're being compromised. So the attacker would essentially send a command, right? A crafted message, a crafted request to the router that's already compromised and is being used as a proxy, and then that could send commands into the network and be like, hey, yo, the hacker Nabil, the hacker adversary Nabil out here wants you guys to all send back this and that information, or attack this and that host, or send this and that back to, through the proxy back to Nabil, right? Because Nabil's hacking our shit. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, everybody? It's like a proxy is when you have somebody do something else for you, right? It could be because they're a trusted authority. It could be because you don't want to do it yourself and get your hands dirty, right? The proxy is your hitman. Terrible analogy. Let's continue.
In addition, the Vault 7 WikiLeaks data dump of classified CIA documents contained an exploit for MikroTik routers.
For those of you who don't know what a proxy is, that makes sense now, though, right? You got it. You got it now, right?
In addition, the Vault 7 WikiLeaks data dump of classified CIA documents contained an exploit for MikroTik routers, he says.
Well, we just talked about the other day how Tetra, the TEA1? TEA1 backdoor. There's supposedly a backdoor. The security researchers believe that the Tetra radio, the TEA1 crypto algorithm that has been signed off on by the NSA, that has been signed off on by export authorities in the United States that are required to sign off on anything that gets exported around the world and used for other countries. Excuse me. I'll count that one. That one's fucking nasty. You can count my burps, new chatters, if you want. You can count my burps. The minus also works. So who lives in a pineapple? Oh, bike packing trip? Nice, thank you. Yeah, I love going on my bike ride. The video on the bottom left right now is actually a bike ride. So we have all sorts of gears hooked up to the bike. You know, like my my watch obviously gives you guys heart rate and other data. I can put the heart rate up here. Location data on the top right. You know, we got chat down there. Yeah, I'm glad you like that. Yeah, people have been helping me out. We're gonna buy some bags. You know, bike packing is expensive because you need to get like ultralight everything. Hey, 3 votes for interview prep. You did a 3-day trip earlier this summer. What a blast. Hey, you know what? If you are enjoying the community, no pressure. If you're enjoying the community, we do talk about cycling. We do have a cycling channel.
In addition,
I'm not gonna probably bike until tomorrow. It's like 50 something here. You know what I mean? It's like it's like a green to yellow zone. I'm not biking here, yeah. I don't think you should bike. AQI 95, you shouldn't bike.
In addition, the Vault 7 WikiLeaks data dump of classified CIA documents contained an exploit for MikroTik routers.
Okay, so like I said before we went off, I know most of you like the rabbit holing. I rabbit hole a lot. Key weakening attack, potentially possible. Rudimentary reverse engineering done on the Tetra walkie-talkies used by police officers and you know, other authorities around the world. Definitely not great, but you know, it was easily reverse engineered. They say it was trivial. And the key, the 80-bit key, was somehow effectively shortened to the point where it'd be even easier to brute force. So they're saying that these communications could retroactively be decrypted by through this vulnerability. Right, there's several vulnerabilities that they found. Apparently, the encryption chip resembles a 3G and Wi-Fi chip, so it's like a pretty standard chip apparently. And apparently, they just didn't pick a good chip. They didn't really pick a good crypto system. And then the security researchers came to the conclusion, they're like, this looks like a backdoor. Like, you're saying this was NSA approved? You're saying this was, you know, export approved? This seems like a backdoor. And the company was like, eh. The company was like, eh. Hey, what's up, ThoughtBot? Thank you. Appreciate you. Welcome. So, let's go. Well, let me turn on elements. There you go. I hope you're having a good day, ThoughtBot. Thanks for hanging out.
In addition, the Vault 7 with a return-oriented programming chain. The attack that Volnchek developed requires the exploit use return-oriented programming, ROPE. ROPE is an exploit technique where an attacker executes malicious code by chaining together small pieces of existing code on the system. Volnchek essentially developed a new rope chain that works against routers on the MIPS Big Endian (MIPS-B) architecture, Baines says. Okay, we won't get into Big Endian because I know I haven't even talked about assembly with most of you before. But most of the time when I was doing anything related to assembly, it would be malware, reverse engineering, and computer system forensics. Did you ever happen to cover the Petro Canada leak? Yeah, actually. Let me pull that up for you if you want. I'll give you a link. Because, yeah, they weren't able to provide pump service for a long time. And for everyone on Twitch, I'm talking to somebody on Kick. I cross-stream. I don't have platform loyalty. I see all of this as a means to an end to get my message out. And to teach people as much as possible. Of course, ThoughtBot. It's really... You know what? If I look up my name in Canada on Twitter... I know Twitter's booty hole now, but here, let's try it. Computer Canada. If I type in Canada... Yeah! Alright, here you go. Perfect. Alright. Thank you, everyone, for the likes. Oh, man, thank you for the likes, Globus. Thank you, Buffy, for the... Of course, ThoughtBot. Appreciate you. Thank you. So, return-oriented programming, right? Basically, if
if you can get a ton of different pieces of code to work together in a way, like I tell you guys all the time, if you have intimate inner knowledge, like a knowledge of the inner workings of a system, open source libraries being used, how they actually structure this, the architecture of the larger program, then you can manipulate things, right? Like we were talking about yesterday. Remember how yesterday I was, 2 days ago, I was teaching you guys about cross-site scripting, the different types of cross-site scripting, blind, right? Stored and reflected, right? Basically, when you're able to understand how things work together, such as sanitization, right, and such as these requests, right, and the encoding mechanisms used to keep this stuff from happening, keep the bad thing from happening, you can sometimes manipulate what is returned, right? So basically, what these people were able to do is they were able to develop a return-oriented programming technique that works specifically on MikroTik routers. And let me see before I link you to this resource. Let me make sure it's a good one. Oh, yeah, this is from CTF 101. So some of you have seen my introductory video on computing, right, on security computing. But this is return-oriented programming, right? So what they're talking about here, like we're referring to, is when you get different bits of code to work together, and you can control the stack, right, which is basically where all the calls on the system are happening, right, and that's where it's pulled from. For those of you who don't know assembly at all, just that's all you really need to know about that. We're not going to dive into it too much. But if you want to learn assembly, Cerberus is always doing malware reverse engineering and knows way more assembly than I. I only took a couple classes on assembly and malware reverse engineering, so that is the person you should ask. As we saw, she streams too. As we saw in buffer overflows, having stack control could be very powerful. It allows us to overwrite saved instruction pointers, right? So what we're going to tell the computer to do. The pointer says the data you're looking for is there, right? So if I have a pointer to an integer, it's going to give me an address in memory where the integer is actually stored. If I have a pointer to a character array, which is a string, right? Which is, any phrase, word, set of words in the English language, right? You could basically overwrite the instructions, right? You could overwrite an integer if instead of an instruction, which is a set of bytes, right? A set of bytes indicating op codes, right? Operation codes. I guess I'm probably going a little too deep for people who came here from the politics side, but the people on the tech side probably know what I'm talking about. And this probably makes sense to some of you, even if you've never heard of assembly or done programming. You're probably starting to put some of this together, right? Giving us control over whatever the program does next, right? When we're overwriting the instruction pointers. Many programs don't have a convenient give shell function. However, so basically then they just go into the example. This is CTF 101. This is one of the things that we reference in the Getting Started Security 101 video. I know a lot of you may not know anything about code. If you're just trying to get started with code, this is a 29-minute video, 30-minute video on getting started with GitHub. At the end of this video, you'll be able to pull something down from GitHub, make a change, and push it back up. You'll know everything you need to know in order to do that. We've had somebody who came from the politics side of Twitch. They were a streamer too. They had no idea what they were doing. They don't know anything about code. They were able to follow that video and get started on GitHub. So it's not too late. You're not too old. You don't know too little to get started now. Okay? And you can always ask me any questions. My question is, can a non-coder become a tech journalist? You're thinking about doing a newsletter on InfoSec. I think you could, but I think a lot of people, they look for authenticity and credibility when it comes to sources. So it might help to take a different approach if you're a non-coder. If you're like a non-coder and a non-technologist, you know what I mean? It might make sense to take a different approach in order to differentiate yourself, because there are a lot of people who are already, I guess accredited, credentialed in the space doing that. You know what I mean?
Volcheck essentially developed a new only an attacker with authenticated access to an affected MikroTik device can exploit the vulnerability. But acquiring
not trying to be mean or anything,
But acquiring credentials to RouterHose is relatively easy, Volcheck said in its report. For one thing, RouterHose ships with an admin user account with an empty string as a default password. Many organizations fail to delete the admin account even though MikroTik itself recommends that organizations delete it.
Okay guys, so this is a big issue with IoT, ICS, and networking equipment, and it has been for a very long time. Insecure default passwords. Do I have the best answer to this? No, I don't. Randomly generating passwords, right, on installation would be great if there's some sort of interface to pass that on to the user. On some networking hardware, there isn't. It would be great if we could include a card with a unique username and password to every single user, but that also has its own security implications, right, if something's intercepted or whatever. So I do not have all the answers. You want to create a newsletter and just figure out what you're going to write about online? Yeah, I would pick a niche that you know very well. You know what I mean? I would pick something you know very well already, because then it's going to be easier for you to talk about it, Thoughtbot. You know what I mean? If you want to do a newsletter, it's like pick something you already know. You know what I mean? Maybe something will come to mind. Maybe it's going to take you a little bit of time, but like, pick something you're already versed in. You know what I mean? Because then you can say, I'm an authority on this for this, that, and the other thing, and then you have your landing page for your newsletter, and people look at that and they're like, damn, Thoughtbot's already an authority on this. You know what I mean? It could be about streaming. If you're watching a lot of streaming and streamers, it could be about we have a friend here who does AI content. They could probably do one on AI and ML, right? Because they've been talking about that for such a long time on stream. So like, or maybe you like to cook, maybe you like to make juice, different types of juice. It could be anything. Maybe you like bikes a lot. You could have a bike newsletter if you know a lot about bikes and you worked at a bike shop or something like that. Some of you are hackers, some of you are political. I'm just a K-pop enthusiast. You do be K-pop in that, bro. You do be K-pop in that.
Many organizations failed to delete the admin account, even though MikroTik itself recommends that organizations delete it.
Disable default
RouterOS also does not enforce any restrictions on passwords.
This is bad.
So, when administrators do set password, they are often easy to guess and offer little protection against brute force attacks, Volchek said. For its part, MikroTik did not immediately respond to a dark reading request for comment submitted via its support email.
Well, this is our first router. What are we going to make the password? Router 1. Router 1. Yeah, you got to hit the Pokey shop, my friend. You could do Pokey help. Check it out. Or you could just hit the extension on the bottom. About struggling in life? Lol, you're probably going to do a topic of self-improvement, overcoming mental health issues. That's a good idea. That's a good idea for like a newsletter. Like a mental health newsletter. I think that's a good idea. Password admin 1. Password router 1. Router 2. Router 3. Oh no, somebody's hacked their router. This is like IP address. Oh man. Well, they probably didn't drop a backdoor or anything. Let's just change the password to router 4. Pokeshop, Pokeball 10. Yeah, exactly. Just like that. That's how you get more Pokeballs.
For its part, MikroTik did not immediately respond to a dark reading request for comment submitted via its support email.
Of course they didn't.
Foisting a new attack against MikroTik. While MikroTik has been aware of this latest issue since at least last October, a CVE identifier and patch for RouterOS long-term wasn't released until July 20th, likely because the bug hasn't posed any real-world risk until now. Researchers at security firm Margin Research first disclosed the vulnerability in an exploit for it dubbed Foisted in June 2022. Foisted enabled root shell access on a x86 virtual machine running RouterOS, but it was a moot exercise, since MikroTik does not ship x86 hardware-based devices, Baines says.
I was gonna say, yeah. Okay.
Nonetheless, Latvia-based MikroTik addressed the issue in an incremental version of the operating system, RouterOS Stable 6.49.7, last October, but made no patch available for major versions, or what MikroTik.
Yeah, lots of hardware like this is not running x86 architecture.
Refers to a Volchek's exploit, on the other hand, works against RouterOS on the MIPS-B architecture that MikroTik uses in many of its products. The exploits, therefore, have a far bigger impact, Baines notes. Foisted had no impact on real-world products. Volchek's findings very much do. The security vendor describes its exploit as a simplified and more practical version of Margin's Foisted. Volchek's research also did some things to weaponize the exploit, for example, eliminating the use of FTP and using a reverse shell instead of a bind shell, Baines says. To protect themselves, Volchek recommends that all organizations using affected versions of the MikroTik devices disable their Winbox and web interfaces, restrict the IP addresses from which admins can log in from,
Yeah, definitely restrict IP ranges. You should be as impermissive as possible. With anything exposed to the internet, guys, you should be as impermissive as possible, as speaking to, career technologists here.
And disable passwords and configure SSH to use public-private keys instead.
Yes.
Ultimately, our
key
recommendation...
management's important. You gotta have a key rotation plan, and you should also, I would say, well, they did say and, but I would say yes, you should do this. Restrict the IPs, and please use keys and distribute them securely, and do not reuse keys. Don't have multiple people using the same key, and, you only want certain users, certain hosts to authenticate when they have certain IP addresses, certain keys. You need a defense in-depth, defense in layers approach. We can't just fuck around, bro. If we fuck around, we're gonna find out. You can't fuck around unless you want to find out.
Ultimately, our recommendation is to move to a passwordless solution, Baines says. Organizations that must use passwords would ideally move to stronger passwords to prevent brute forcing.
As we've talked about previously, well, yesterday, key shortening attacks, and I keep on talking about because I talked about it the day before as well. Key shortening attacks are the best way to, circumvent a crypto system. Well, Kyle, you haven't told us about how these things happen. I actually did. I told you yesterday. So basically, when people are reusing initialization vectors, when people do things that are actually, unfortunately, weakening the robustness of a crypto, it effectively reduces the key space. It reduces the amount of stuff you actually need to check in order to arrive at a solution that is, correct. So it makes brute forcing astronomically easier. Having threat intel, yes, IOCs, indicator of compromise, is correct. Most people's modems are also routers. Yes, we're all behind at least, I guess you. So we're all about, yes. So routers do a lot more than just routing traffic. Network address translation, yeah, you have one IP address. On your home network, you have one IP address that is used, and it's given to you by your ISP. And that IP address is what you use to communicate with the rest of the internet. If you want to ever communicate outside of your network, that's the IP address that the services, people, computers see, right? In their logs, in their system, in their connections. That is the one. So your router is running DHCP to sign out IP address and to give out IP addresses to every single device that comes on your network. It's running DHCP. It's doing DHCP leases. It's doing network address translation. Obviously, it's doing routing and switching as well. So yeah, your router does a lot. And there's other stuff running, like spanning tree protocol, right, on older ones. I don't know if they still do that. Do they still run spanning tree protocols, guys, on the all-in-one routers? Can somebody who's a fucking nerd let me know? Can someone who's a fucking nerd let me know? Are we still running STP on modem router combos? Probably, right? I don't know. I'm old. I would love to know if STP is. I know there's some issues with it, which is why I'm asking. Yeah, spanning tree protocol, if I remember correctly. That's from like my second year of fucking college or some shit. Damn. Netgear, not Netgear. A lot of Cisco spanning tree. Yeah, a lot of Cisco hardware, like intermediary Cisco hardware, uses that shit. You're an old man, though. I know, right? I feel old. These youths making me feel old. All right, let's see. MikroTik routers are prolific throughout the private industry and we'll say state agencies. See you later, man. MikroTik routers are prolific throughout private industry and state agencies alike. So these MIPS based devices are susceptible to full takeover. And man in the middle attacks. Full takeover here. Let's see. No, I'm gonna make this a separate thought. This CVE opens up the devices to arbitrary code execution at the OS level, man in the middle, and the OS level and man in the middle. Oh, I think I need to use the lowercase I. Affix is already out. A lot of you say you can't make every stream, so you want me to tweet out the news. Well, there you go. I did it. Proof. Proof. And sometimes people highlight it out. So if you feel like highlighting out the news, let me know.